The night was unusually heavy on the shadowed world of Ketharis, a planet suspended in perpetual twilight where twin moons drenched the land in a spectral, silvery glow. The air shimmered with ghostly motes of bioluminescence, drifting like restless spirits through the forest canopy, while alien trees hummed in low, haunting tones that no human could fully decipher. It was here, amidst this dangerous beauty, that Commander Elias Varin crouched behind a jagged cluster of glowing crystals, his breath shallow, his heart hammering against cracked ribs. He was never supposed to be here. Certainly not like this, alone, hunted, half dead. He had come to Ketharis as part of an Earth Colonial Authority survey mission, responding to strange, intelligent-sounding transmissions emanating from the sector. But what had started as a peaceful exploratory venture had devolved into catastrophe the moment they crossed into what locals considered sacred land. A vast sanctuary of black spires etched with unfathomable glyphs. That was when the hunters came. Silent and merciless, clad in glimmering armor, they cut down most of his squad before anyone could even raise a weapon. A few were dragged off alive, but Elias had no illusions about their fate. By sheer instinct and years of brutal military training, he slipped their net, and now, hours later, he was a ghost himself, bloodied, torn, and armed only with desperation. Every sigh of the wind, every faint shiver of bioluminescent vines set his nerves ablaze. The hunger gnawing at him was a minor irritation compared to the exhaustion weighing down his entire body. Yet he knew he couldn't stop moving. Not yet. Somewhere out there, the hunters still stalked him. Somewhere closer still, someone was already watching. High above, cloaked within the shifting canopy, Solara Valen, heiress to the Ketharin clans, observed the human struggle with quiet intensity. Her silver hair tumbled like molten starlight over her shoulders, catching the moon's glow in shimmering waves. Her skin radiated a faint lavender luminescence, the mark of her people, making her seem at once ethereal and dangerous. Her armor, forged of rare metals and inlaid with story runes older than Earth itself, gleamed faintly as she moved. Since the moment Elias had slipped past her warriors, Solara had shadowed him, intrigued despite herself by his refusal to die, his stubborn will to keep fighting. She hated trespassers, hated their arrogance, their blindness to the ancient forces that dwelled within Ketharis. And yet, there was something about this human, a rawness in him, a haunted determination she couldn't quite name. Perhaps that was why she now crept closer, blade already drawn, ready to end what her warriors could not. The strike came like lightning. One moment Elias was scanning the trees, the next a hot blade tore through his side, pain exploding across his nerves. He spun, rifle raised on instinct, then froze. The creature before him was unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Lethal beauty radiated from her in waves, her glowing eyes fixed on him with fury and something deeper. She didn't speak, just lunged again. Chaos followed. He fired wildly, each bolt tearing through empty air as she weaved and slipped between his shots like moonlight through leaves. Then she was inside his reach, his rifle useless, and it was hand against blade, strength against precision. Her attacks came fast and sharp, her lean frame deceptively strong. And yet Elias met each strike with desperate ferocity, driven by pure survival instinct. Together they clashed under the twin moons, every movement illuminated by bursts of stray plasma and crushed bioluminescent flora beneath their feet. At last, he stumbled, bloodied and gasping, his boot catching on a thick root. He fell hard, the wind knocked from his lungs, and stared up at her looming silhouette, framed in silver moonlight. Her blade hovered over him, gleaming with lethal promise, and then inexplicably stilled. Her expression softened just enough to betray hesitation. "Who are you?" she asked at last, her voice low, melodic yet edged with steel. "Why did you come here?" Elias coughed, clutching his side, his eyes blazing even in defeat. "Commander, Elias Varin," he rasped. "We weren't here to destroy anything. We thought there might be allies out here." For a long moment, Solara only stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, to his surprise, she knelt beside him, pressing a glowing palm over his wound. Warmth flooded through him as the pain dulled to nothing, but the warmth felt strange, alive, as though it carried something back into her. He gasped. What did you just do?" he demanded, panic creeping into his voice. Solara's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "You'll see soon enough, human." And without another word, she rose and melted into the shadows, leaving Elias lying there, confused, alive, and forever changed. The sensation that followed left Elias reeling. He shook his head, trying to make sense of it, but logic failed him. This was beyond anything he'd experienced before. As he stepped out of the crude shelter into the pale moonlight, he noticed subtle yet undeniable changes. The world seemed sharper somehow. Colors glowed with impossible vibrancy, and the alien hums of the forest sang clearer, deeper, as though the air itself had become alive. At first, he chalked it up to adrenaline, or the fading shock of his injuries. But the feeling didn't subside. It only grew stronger, more insistent, as if something inside him had shifted in ways he couldn't yet name. It wasn't until he caught sight of his reflection in a still, dark pool that the truth hit him like a freight train. His eyes, once a deep, steady blue, now shimmered faintly, flecked with gold that sparked in the moonlight. Along his temples, faint lavender veins pulsed with the same glow he had seen on her skin. Panic surged through him as he splashed icy water onto his face, desperately hoping to wash away whatever illusion this was. But nothing changed. The reflection stared back at him, strange and real and terrifying. What did she do to me? He muttered to himself, his fingers trembling as they ran through his damp hair. He could still hear her cryptic parting words, "You'll see soon enough." But what had she meant? Was this a punishment, a curse, or something worse? Had she marked him somehow, bound him to her kind in a way he couldn't even begin to comprehend? Determined to find answers, Elias set off in the direction she'd vanished hours earlier. The forest no longer felt quite as threatening. In fact, its dangers seemed muted, his senses guiding him effortlessly around pitfalls and predators he wouldn't even have noticed before. He moved with a strange, newfound grace, every sound and scent as vivid as a memory. Yet even as he marveled at these changes, unease gnawed at him. He wasn't entirely human anymore. That much was clear. But what exactly was he becoming? And why? High above, sitting cross-legged atop a jagged outcrop that overlooked the valley, Solara Valen watched the moons and let her thoughts churn like storm clouds. She hadn't planned to take his blood. It should have been simple: kill the intruder, protect her people, move on. But something in him, something in the way he looked at her, had stayed her hand. Not just his plea for understanding, but the defiance in his eyes. The spark of something she hadn't expected from an outsider. And now his blood coursed through her veins as well. In Ketharan culture, exchanging blood was no small thing. It wasn't just biological. It was spiritual, a bond forged at the deepest level, tying two souls together across whatever barriers might have separated them before. By taking his blood, she'd unknowingly tied their fates. The implications weighed on her heavily. She was heir to a throne. Such entanglements weren't just forbidden. They were reckless, dangerous. And yet, she couldn't ignore the quiet pull that kept drawing her thoughts back to him. "He's different," she murmured aloud, absently tracing the edge of her blade. But different how? She couldn't quite say. Humans were primitive by every standard her people used to measure progress. Yet they were tenacious, driven in a way that reminded her of the ancestors who'd first climbed the cliffs of Ketharis and claimed dominion over its wild moons. Maybe that was why she couldn't bring herself to let him die. Still, doubts clung to her like shadows. What if this bond endangered her people? What if it exposed weaknesses she couldn't yet see? The questions followed her as she rose and began descending back into the heart of the forest. There was only one way to find her answers. She had to confront the source of her turmoil once again. When Elias finally caught up to her, it was in a clearing, a natural cathedral where the towering trees arched above, their branches laced with luminous vines. She stood in the center, her back to him, radiating a calm authority that made his resolve falter for a moment. He almost turned and left. Almost. But curiosity and a stubborn streak he'd never managed to shake pushed him forward. "You drank my blood," he called, his voice steadier than he felt. "What does that mean? What's happening to me?" She turned slowly to face him, her expression unreadable. "On Ketharis," she said at last, her voice as melodic as it was commanding, "sharing blood is sacred. It forges a bond, a link between two souls. I didn't intend it, but now." She trailed off, her eyes flickering with something that looked suspiciously like guilt. "Now we're connected." "Connected how?" he pressed, taking another step closer. "Am I changing into one of you?" She shook her head. Not entirely. Your biology is too different, but traces of my essence remain within you. They're altering certain aspects of your physiology, heightened senses, increased stamina. These are side effects of the bond. He frowned, trying to absorb her words. And you? Did you get anything from this exchange? Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Your determination, your courage, qualities I underestimated in humans. Despite the weight of what she was saying, Elias couldn't help but let out a dry chuckle. So, I'm teaching you about bravery, huh? Good to know I'm making an impression. Her smile widened slightly, though it didn't reach her eyes. Don't mistake humor for dismissal, human. This bond carries risks for both of us. My people will not approve of what's happened. If they find out what I've done, they'll come after you, he finished grimly. Great, just what I needed. Another group of aliens trying to kill me. Solara's gaze softened just a fraction, but her voice was quiet and firm. Not just you, Elias. Now, they'll come for both of us. They won't stop at killing you, Solara corrected sharply, her voice cutting through the still air. They'll want to study you, dissect you, learn everything they can about your kind. All because of my mistake. Elias studied her for a long moment, noting the rigid set of her shoulders, the way her fingers clenched just a little too tightly around her blade. She carried her duty like armor, but he could see the cracks. Against his better judgment, he felt a strange pang of sympathy. Then let's fix it, he said firmly. Her head snapped up, her lavender eyes wide in surprise. Fix it? How? I don't know yet, he admitted, his mouth quirking into a dry half-smile. But running isn't going to solve anything. If we're stuck with each other, we might as well figure out how to make the best of it. For the first time since he'd met her, Solara laughed, a rich, melodic sound that carried through the clearing like chimes in a storm. You truly are unlike any human I've encountered. Well, he quipped, unable to resist, I aim to please. She gave him another rare smile, faint but genuine. But the moment didn't last. From the edge of the clearing, a low growl rippled through the air, followed by the unmistakable crunch of twigs underfoot. Both of them spun toward the sound, weapons already raised, as shadows began to shift and close in around them. Whatever fragile piece they'd managed to carve out was about to shatter. And neither of them knew if their tenuous bond would be enough to save them. The shadows resolved into shapes, sleek, predatory, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Elias tightened his grip on his plasma rifle. Beside him, Solara unsheathed her curved blade, stepping shoulder to shoulder with him, her whisper sharp and urgent. Stay close, she said. These aren't ordinary predators. They're hunters, bred for war. Elias nodded grimly, his enhanced senses already picking up details. The weight shifts in the creature's stance, the eerie rhythm of their breathing. It was unsettling how attuned he felt to the environment now, but he shoved the thought aside and focused on survival. The first hunter lunged, claws flashing toward Solara. She moved like water, sidestepping with fluid grace and slashing her blade in a wide arc. The creature roared, stumbled, and crumpled at her feet. But two more closed in immediately, circling them like wolves. Any bright ideas? Elias barked, squeezing off a burst of plasma that singed one's flank but failed to stop it. Follow my lead, Solara shot back, already darting forward with dazzling speed. For a moment, Elias could only watch. She moved like a dancer, every step deliberate, every strike precise and deadly. It was mesmerizing and terrifying to see her fighting at full force. Then he joined her. His movements felt instinctive, almost in sync with hers, as though something deep in his blood now understood her rhythm. When one of the hunters lunged at him, he rolled aside just in time for Solara to cut it down in a single, fluid strike. They fought back to back. Sound unspoken, but effective. Their teamwork born of necessity rather than practice. Yet the odds kept stacking against them. More hunters emerged from the tree line, sleek shapes cutting through the darkness, their sheer numbers overwhelming. Sweat dripped into Elias's eyes as fatigue gnawed at his arms, his earlier confidence starting to waver. He risked a glance at Solara, who showed no sign of slowing down. If anything, her glow burned brighter with each kill, her strikes growing sharper and more desperate. We can't keep this up forever, he shouted, barely ducking a swipe aimed at his throat. We don't have to, she called back, her voice taut with resolve. There's always a way out. Before he could ask what she meant, Solara reached into a pouch at her hip and pulled out a small orb, its surface pulsing with an eerie inner light. Without hesitation, she hurled it into the center of the clearing. The orb exploded in a blinding flash, a deafening crack splitting the air. Shockwaves rippled through the clearing as the hunters reeled, screeching in agony, their hypersensitive senses overwhelmed by the blast. Solara didn't waste a second. She seized Elias's arm, yanking him forward. "Run!" They tore through the forest side by side, weaving between gnarled trunks, leaping over roots, their movements almost supernaturally synchronized. Elias's newfound agility carried him faster than he'd thought possible, keeping pace with her through the twisting terrain. Behind them, the wounded hunter's cries faded into the distant hum of the forest. Only when they reached a secluded cave tucked into the cliffs did they allow themselves to stop. Elias collapsed against the cool stone wall, chest heaving as he wiped sweat from his brow. "That was insane," he panted. "What was that thing you threw?" "A sonic disruptor," she replied, still catching her breath. "One of the few tools we carry for emergencies. Effective, but dangerous if mishandled." He let out a weak laugh. "Dangerous seems to be your middle name." Her lips quirked upward, though her expression stayed guarded. "If we're going to survive this, you'd better get used to such risks. My people are not forgiving, nor are the creatures that roam these lands." Elias straightened slightly, his gaze steady despite his exhaustion. "Speaking of your people," he began carefully, "what happens now?" "Those hunters weren't random," Elias said quietly, his eyes narrowing as the thought settled into place. "They were sent, weren't they?" Solara hesitated, her gaze falling to the ground as though the answer weighed too much to look him in the eye. "Yes," she admitted at last. "Someone knows about the bond, someone powerful enough to deploy trackers." Elias let out a low curse under his breath, dragging his hand through his hair. "So we're fugitives now, on your planet, hunted by beasts and your own kind. Lovely." "It's not hopeless," she said, more firmly than she seemed to feel. But her voice betrayed a faint crack of uncertainty beneath the steel. "There are places even my people cannot easily reach, sanctuaries, hidden deep within the wilderness. If we can reach one, we may buy ourselves time to figure out our next move." "And what then?" Elias shot back, his tone heavy with doubt. "We hide there forever? Pretend none of this ever happened?" Solara's head snapped up, her lavender eyes locked on his with fierce intensity, her voice low but unyielding. "No, we use the bond to our advantage. Together we uncover its secrets, and perhaps find a way to turn this curse into a weapon." For a moment, Elias only stared at her, torn between admiration and disbelief. This alien princess, this woman he barely understood, was standing in a dark cave plotting the impossible, and somehow, against all reason, he believed her. Maybe it was the quiet desperation of their situation. Maybe it was the strange hum of connection thrumming under his skin. Either way, he knew one thing. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. For hours, they navigated the labyrinthine tunnels, their footsteps echoing faintly in the damp darkness. The deeper they ventured, the colder the air became, carrying with it not only the faint metallic tang of minerals, but something else, something ancient, strange, that prickled at Elias's heightened senses. Solara led the way, her movements confident even as the shadows pressed in. In her hand, a small device cast a muted glow over the rough-hewn path, just bright enough to avoid jagged rocks and yawning crevices. "This tunnel leads to one of the ancient sanctuaries," she murmured at last, her voice barely more than a whisper over the steady drip of water in the distance. "Few outsiders know of its existence. Fewer still dare to enter." Elias arched a brow. "Why's that? Booby traps? Cursed relics?" She shot him a sidelong glance, her lips twitching just enough to betray the faintest smile. "Something like that. The sanctuary is protected by safeguards. Some are physical, others..." She hesitated just long enough to unnerve him. "Less tangible." "Great," he muttered dryly. "Just what I needed. More mysteries to unravel." But even through the sarcasm, Solara heard it, a spark of curiosity in his tone he couldn't quite hide. She paused mid-step, turning to face him fully. "You're different from the humans I've studied," she said, tilting her head as though to see him more clearly. "Most would be consumed by fear right now, and yet here you are. Joking about curses and traps like this is some grand adventure." Elias shrugged, adjusting his rifle against his shoulder. Fear doesn't do much good when you're already neck-deep in trouble. Might as well laugh while I can. Her expression softened slightly, a flicker of respect passing through her gaze. Perhaps that's why the Bond chose you, she murmured. He stopped short, his own tone sharper than he intended. The Bond didn't choose me. You did. Remember? The whole drinking my blood thing? Her eyes hardened at that, though there was no malice, just a quiet acknowledgement of his anger. Fair enough, she said evenly. But whether you like it or not, the bond exists, and it's stronger than either of us anticipated. Elias opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, the ground beneath their feet trembled. A low rumble swept through the cavern, dust raining from the ceiling. Instinctively, he reached for the wall to steady himself, his fingers brushing Solara's arm in the process. The moment his skin touched hers, a jolt ripped through them both, sharp and electric, leaving them frozen, wide-eyed, as the connection flared brighter than it ever had before. What was that? Elias whispered, his voice hoarse with bewilderment. Solara's brow furrowed as her lavender glow brightened faintly, her eyes darting across the cavern as though trying to read the very walls. The safeguards, she murmured at last, almost to herself. They're reacting to the bond. How? Her answer was barely audible, her voice tinged with something that might have been fear. I don't know. But whatever happens next, stay close, very close. The rumbling deepened, accompanied by a low hum that thrummed inside their chests. Shadows flickered wildly along the cavern walls as Solara's device flickered erratically, casting strange, twisting shapes that seemed almost alive. Ahead, the tunnel split into 3 dark paths, each swallowed by shadow. Elias hesitated, eyes flicking between the passages, fingers tightening instinctively around his rifle. Which way? He asked, voice tight. Solara closed her eyes, inhaling slowly and evenly. After a pause, she pointed without hesitation to the middle path. This one. How can you be sure? She opened her eyes, calm but resolute. I can't explain it. I just feel it. Trust me. Elias wanted to argue, demand a logical answer, but the unwavering conviction in her gaze held him back. There was no room for doubt there, only iron resolve. Reluctantly, he nodded and followed her into the shadowed passage. As they pressed deeper, the atmosphere grew stranger still. The air thickened, clinging to their skin like a second layer. Temperatures swung wildly between icy chill and stifling heat. Strange symbols etched into the stone walls began to glow faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the humming that filled the tunnel. A mounting pressure pressed against Elias's chest, as if the very air resisted his presence. Solara, too, faltered, beads of sweat forming on her brow. Then, without warning, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling vanished into darkness far above. At the center stood a massive crystalline monolith, its facets fracturing the dim light into a swirling kaleidoscope of color. The sight was breathtaking, but it was the figures surrounding the crystal that rooted them to the spot. Dozens of translucent humanoid shapes hovered silently. Ghost-like and shimmering, they neither moved nor spoke, yet their presence pressed down with an unbearable weight, making each breath a struggle. Instinctively, Elias raised his plasma rifle, but Solara's hand gripped his arm firmly, shaking her head. They're not enemies, she whispered, voice trembling. They're guardians. Guardians of what? Elias asked, eyes darting between the spectral forms and the glowing crystal. Of the truth, she said cryptically. Whatever lies within that crystal holds answers. Answers we may not be ready to face. As if summoned by her words, the crystal pulsed brighter, bathing the chamber in radiant waves of light. The guardians stirred, their forms flowing together until they merged into a single towering entity. Its voice, when it came, was neither male nor female, neither kind nor cruel, only vast, echoing like thunder through the chamber. You seek knowledge, it intoned, piercing their very souls. But knowledge comes at a cost. Are you prepared to pay it? Elias glanced at Solara. Her expression mirrored his unease, eyes wide, jaw tight. Prepared for what? He called out, steadying his voice despite the fear that curled in his gut. The entity tilted its immense head, studying him. To know the origin of the bond is to accept its consequences. To understand is to change. Choose wisely. Before either could answer, the crystal flared with blinding light, engulfing them entirely. When the brilliance faded, Elias and Solara found themselves standing in a place utterly transformed, a sprawling city bathed in golden sunlight, unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Towering spires twisted skyward, their surfaces alive with shifting, flowing patterns like molten glass. Valerans moved gracefully among the streets, their purpose clear in each deliberate step. This isn't possible, Solara breathed, voice trembling with awe. This city hasn't existed for centuries. Elias frowned, scanning the vibrant surroundings. What is this place? A memory, she said softly, eyes wide with wonder. A fragment of the past, preserved within the crystal. But why would it show us this? As if answering, the scene shifted, revealing a council chamber where Vyleran elders gathered. Their faces were grave, weighed down by the importance of their debate. One elder rose, her voice carrying the same resonant echo as the Guardians. The bond is a bridge, not a chain, she declared. Through it, unity may be achieved, or destruction ensured. Choose wisely, for the fate of both our species rests upon your decision. The vision dissolved, leaving Elias and Solara standing once more in the silent chamber, the weight of the prophecy hanging heavy in the air. Solara and Elias stood in the cavern once more, the crystal now dark and silent. They exchanged a long, uncertain glance, the weight of what they had just witnessed settling heavily on their shoulders. Whatever the bond truly was, it was far more intricate and perilous than either had imagined. "We need to talk," Elias said at last, breaking the silence. "About everything." Solara nodded, her face grave but determined. "Agreed. But first, we need to survive long enough to make sense of it all." From the shadows beyond the chamber, unseen eyes glinted with malicious intent. The tension in the cavern thickened as Elias and Solara stood frozen, their minds racing to process the enormity of their discovery. The bond between them wasn't just a biological anomaly. It was part of something far older, a mechanism crafted for connection and unity. But with that knowledge came a chilling realization. They were not alone. Somewhere out there, unseen forces watched, waited, and plotted against them. Suddenly, a low hum filled the cavern, louder and more urgent than before. Footsteps echoed sharply from the tunnel behind. Solara's eyes snapped toward the entrance, her grip tightening on her blade. "They've found us," she whispered urgently. Elias didn't need more explanation. He felt it too, the closing presence, cold and deadly. Whoever approached was no diplomat. They had come to eliminate the threat the bond represented. "Can we fight our way out?" Elias asked quietly but firmly. Solara shook her head. "Too many. We'd never make it back the way we came." Elias scanned the chamber desperately, his gaze locked on the crystalline monolith at the center, its facets shimmering faintly, as if inviting him. "What about that?" he asked. "Can it transport us somewhere else?" Solara's expression shifted from desperation to cautious hope. "It might, but activating it will drain us, body and mind. Are you willing to take that risk?" Elias met her steady gaze. "Do we have a choice?" She nodded grimly. "Then hold on tight. This won't be pleasant." Together, they stepped forward, their hands instinctively reaching for each other. Fingers intertwined, the bond between them flared to life, a warmth spreading like liquid sunlight through their veins. The crystal responded instantly, glowing brighter and brighter until the entire chamber was bathed in radiant light. Behind them, the shouts of their pursuers erupted into the cavern, but it was too late. With a surge of energy, the crystal enveloped them, pulling them into its depths. When Elias opened his eyes, he lay on soft grass beneath a sky awash in orange and pink. The air was sweet, scented with blooming flowers and distant seas. Beside him, Solara stirred, her silver hair fanned like a halo, her lavender skin glowing softly in the twilight. "Where are we?" Elias asked, sitting up and surveying the rolling hills dotted with crystalline trees refracting the fading sunlight into dazzling patterns. In the distance, a massive lake shimmered like liquid gold, its surface rippling gently. "This is Laria," Solara said, her voice tinged with awe. "One of the oldest sanctuaries on my world. Few know it even exists." Elias exhaled sharply. "Well, I guess we're safe, for now. But how do we get back? And what do we do next?" Solara's luminous eyes met his, filled with firm resolve. "We don't go back, not yet. First, we need to understand the bond fully. Only then can we decide how to wield it." Over the following days, they explored the sanctuary together, uncovering its secrets piece by piece. The place was alive in ways neither had expected. trees bending slightly as they passed, streams guiding them to hidden clearings where ancient artifacts lay buried. Each discovery revealed new insights about the bond's nature and its vast potential. Through trial and error, they learned to harness its power. Elias found he could channel bursts of energy through his rifle, magnifying its firepower exponentially. Solara's healing abilities grew stronger, allowing her to mend wounds faster than ever before. Together, they became a formidable team, their strengths perfectly complementary. Yet the bond also tested their limits, forcing them to confront buried fears and doubts. There were moments when the strain threatened to tear them apart, but each time they faltered. They found renewed strength in one another, growing closer with every challenge overcome. One evening, as they sat beside the golden lake watching the stars emerge, Solara broke the silence. "I used to think humans were reckless and destructive, that your kind brought chaos wherever you went." Elias smirked. "And now?" She smiled softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Now I see that chaos isn't always bad. Sometimes it's necessary for growth, for change." He reached out, gently squeezing her hand. "Change isn't easy, though, especially when it means risking everything." "No," she agreed, turning to meet his eyes. "But maybe that's why it's worth it." Their quiet moment shattered as the ground trembled beneath their feet. The lake churned violently, and from its depths a towering guardian emerged, similar to the one in the crystal chamber, but calm and almost welcoming. "You have proven yourselves worthy," its voice resonated across the valley. "The bond has chosen you not as tools, but as partners. Through unity, balance may be restored." "What does that mean?" Elias asked, rising alongside Solara. "It means you must return," the Guardian replied. "Your people and mine need leaders who understand coexistence's value. The path ahead will be difficult, but the bond will guide you." Before they could respond, the Guardian raised a hand, and a shimmering portal opened before them. Through it, glimpses of Vora's capital city flickered, bustling, alive. It was time to face their destiny. Months later, Elias and Solara stood side by side on a grand balcony overlooking the city. Humans and Valoran mingled freely below, working hand in hand to rebuild after years of mistrust and conflict. The bond they shared had become a symbol of hope, inspiring others to choose collaboration over division. As the sun set, bathing the world in golden light, Solara leaned into Elias, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't hesitated that night in the forest?" He chuckled, wrapping an arm around her. "Probably wouldn't be here having this conversation, but hey, no regrets, right?" She smiled, her heart full of gratitude and love. No regrets. Together, they gazed out at the future they had forged, a future built on trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond that had changed them both forever.